Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. My name's Mallory and today I am here with a good friend of mine, or someone who I've met recently who already feels like a dear friend to me, Damia Mendoza. And I am so grateful that she agreed to be here with me and talk to me about her English language learning journey. Hi Damia, how are you doing?
Hi everyone. Hey Mallory. I am doing very well. I'm really excited to talk about it today, see how anything that comes out of our conversation can help others. That's the hope, at least. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I'm hoping, just as we're getting started, could you just give the viewers a little bit of a background on who you are and what your story is and things like that?
That feels like an existential question sometimes, but I guess for the purpose of the channel and the audience, I will start with where I come from and where I am now in my life in the US. So I was born and raised in Ecuador in South America, speaking Spanish for the most part. I spent most of my life playing tennis, which means I wasn't very good at keeping up with my schooling. And English was actually the worst subject that I had. I think I was generally a good student, but English was usually the thing that intimidated me, the one that I was not doing well on. And I usually would just make jokes in the classroom versus actually paying attention. I think that was a way for me to cope, that I just didn't feel smart enough to learn it. And so that was most of my adolescent or teenage years. And then later on, when I was 17 and a half years old, I immigrated to the United States and I went to high school. They actually bumped me down, which I think it's kind of normal for people who immigrate to be bumped down a couple of grades because of the English skills. So at 17 and a half, I was going into, I believe, senior year or so, or it's what I was supposed to be doing, but I got down to the 10th grade. So I had to repeat 11th and 12th grade again. And I came right in the middle of 10th grade as well. There were a lot of family disagreements at the time. So I went back for 6 months because my parents were saying, let's just not be in the US. But it had been a few months. So I asked my parents, hey, I actually do want to live there and learn, or at least try to learn English. So they allowed me to come back, and I was sort of on my own for about a year. So anyways, I continued going to high school. About a year later, after trying to learn English, the SATs came on, which are, these, what I thought were really hard tests that you take in junior and senior year of high school to get into schools. I think that was the worst.
They were hard for me, so I can imagine.
Yeah, they were really hard, and it was really intimidating. But one thing that I'll point out is, and we can get more into this later, but the better you learn your native language, the easier it will be to learn a second language. And I know that sounds crazy at the beginning because it's a completely different language and it sounds different and it works different. But the reality is that it's one thing to learn the language itself, and it's another to learn to communicate. And so the better you know how to communicate in your own language, it's just a matter of learning the new words, right? And then you apply, in terms of communication to that new language. Another thing that helped me with those tests was that Latin words are actually a lot of the fancy words in English, or a lot of times the medical words, the historical context words. And I was just able to carry that from Spanish because I did focus a lot in learning my own language. So that helped a lot. Going back to my story, I got into college. I think I never went back to living in Ecuador. Then I went to Syracuse University. I studied philosophy, which is ironic because that requires a lot of English writing in organizing the words and making good arguments. I also study policy studies, and I graduated in 2015. And then I joined the consultant world, and here I am. I dream now in English, which apparently it's an indicator that you're fluent. So there's, and yeah, this is where I am right now.
Okay, that is incredible. I'm going to take it back a little bit because I have a couple of questions. First of all, did you say you graduated college in 2015?
Oh, that's a good call out. Also, introducing my dog Sadie, who will make appearance.
So cute.
High school in 2015, college in 2018. So I was able to fit both majors in 3 years as well.
Okay, very cool. Then we were on a very similar track. And I know we've talked about this before. I don't think we have to go into it on the internet, but we're the same age. And I think we graduated high school and college around the same time, because I graduated high school a year early. So I graduated in 2014, but I didn't graduate college until 2019. So pretty similar.
It's like the same timeline.
And we'll leave it to the audience to do the math if they really want to. So when you moved here the first time, and you were 17 and a half, and they put you in 10th grade to kind of put you back a little bit because you were still learning English and things like that. How did you feel about that? Were you like on board? You're like, yeah, I need that. Or were you like kind of bummed out about it?
Definitely the latter. I think most people are demoralized, discouraged, mad. I think it's valid, mad. I think that's common for high schoolers. It's even worse when we're talking about professionals, people who are engineers, doctors, lawyers, completely, capable professionals who are just not treated as such in the US. So I would say my case, as a high schooler, was much easier than someone who is a doctor and suddenly they come into a new country and they can be a doctor. So my experience was definitely a little demoralizing. I imagine it's the case for most people as well.
Yeah, I could definitely see that and totally understand. I mean, I'd not understand from a standpoint that I've been through it, but understand from the standpoint of, watching so many friends and students that I've worked with and things like that go through that. It's really disheartening, because you've all worked so hard to get where you are in your professions and in your education and all those things, and to come to a new country and for them to say that that's not as good as what we have here, so you have to like start over or go backwards, is, oh man, that's not cool. It's just not cool.
Yeah,
to say the least. Yeah, so I feel for you on that. I can totally see how that would be really hard.
Yeah, I think I am on the lucky side. Definitely, I do feel privileged in the sense that I was able to overcome that. I had my family support. And I have to acknowledge that for a lot of immigrants in the US, I had it really easy because I could just focus on going to school. I didn't have to have 1 or 2 or 3 jobs after school. I didn't have to take care of little children that were my siblings. So generally, I would say I was very fortunate in that sense. I was fortunate to get into extracurricular activities and, and engage in those social interactions that might not contribute to my schooling, but definitely contribute to the English learning side of. I just wanted to point that out, that it's obviously very different for everyone depending on their life situation.
Yeah, totally. And I definitely want to get into those extracurriculars because I know that those were a big proponent of your English language learning journey. So I definitely want to talk about that. But one other thing that I want to ask you about, just kind of your process coming to the States, is what made you want to move here in the first place?
That's I think that goes back like way beyond my own decision making. I was still young enough, but essentially my grandmother back in the day when it was way easier to immigrate to the United States, she was director for a local hospital, and at the time it was like, well, you're a doctor, yeah, we want you here, come on, like your job is reputable enough, come on, and that kind of deal. So my grandma was able to immigrate a long time ago, and because she became a citizen, because she's been here for a long time, she always go back, but she had been in the US for a long time. It was sort of easy to like request that my family come to, but it ended up being the case that for that high school period, I was the only one in my family here, so I benefited from my grandma's, I guess, immigration status and the fact that we were family. That's on the legal side. On the me personal side, I don't know. I think I was just a teenager thinking that it would be great for me to learn English, and maybe I'd like to how schooling was different here in the United States compared to South America. Even if you go to private schools, obviously depending on the region, right? Because the schooling situation can be quite different across the US, but at least in New York, the school that I was going to was an international high school. It's called the International High School. So it was people from all over the world. The teachers were so loving. I still consider them an important part of my life, of my upbringing. I mean, I feel like I owe a lot to them, not just in the classroom, but just the impact that they had on me. And I really did fall in love with that school that I went to. It is a very special place. They're really dedicated to newcomers in all the senses. So we don't even have tests. It's one of those schools where at the end of your junior year, you present a portfolio. So you come up with different projects, kind of like consulting world a little bit. You do a project on language, you do a project on mathematics, and you put that portfolio together, you present it, and then you either pass or you fail, or they give you feedback. So I really fell in love with that kind of education, which is what made me want to ask my parents to let me come back. And it was kind of hard because I was sort of failing my English classes in Ecuador. So I can't think that I made that decision. That's how bad it was.
Hey, I mean, I guess sometimes that's what it takes, is to I don't want to tell people what it takes to be successful in English is to move to the United States, because that's not true, but I'm glad that it helped you. And I'm glad that you had a good experience, even though, you know, there were some setbacks with high school and things like that. I mean, that sounds kind of cool. I wish I had gone to a school that there were no tests. That sounds nice. And just portfolios, but I'm sure there's pros and cons too.
Yep. Well, they had tests. They weren't those intense, you know, state level tests that were very, I feel like they built so much anxiety. We didn't have those.
100%.
The teachers actually got to know and like talk to you about how you were doing in school. So yeah, I feel very fortunate in that regard too.
That's cool. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And just so you know, those state tests do cause a lot of anxiety. I could go into a very big, long story about the first one that I had to take, and I got really sick, but I'm not going to go into that. That's for another day. So I'm curious. Sorry, I'm just like looking at my notes here. So I know you and I talked about extracurriculars and that helping you learn English. And you mentioned how you struggled in your English classes in Ecuador. What changed when you came to the United States about how your approach about how you learn English, and what helped you learn and move you forward in that process?
Yeah, so I will start saying that we all learn differently, right? We all have different learning styles, which I recommend people do. It is important to figure out what tools do I need and what kind of learner am I, so that you progress a lot quicker than if you're just not aware about how you learn.
Mm.
That's not to say that I was very intentional about it when I was younger. I think going through the process of learning English helped me figure out that I needed to know how I learned.
Mhm.
But, you know, just to save people who are watching this a step, take the time to figure out how do you learn, and how do you keep learning fun so that it doesn't lead to burnout, to you being tired and essentially giving up on whatever it is you're trying to learn. So back in high school, when I was just learning, I sort of got tired of the English classes. I felt that they were a little boring for me. Again, that structure,
Yeah.
the detail kind of classes, that works for people, but it didn't work for me. So I didn't want to go to the English classes that walked me through all the grammar. I think I was most so craving just using the language for normal human social interaction things. So instead of going to those classes, what I decided to do, again, I don't think it was that intentional at the time, but it worked, was to pick classes that I was interested in. So subjects that I was interested in, and join those in English versus having to go to my normal classes, maybe in my language or with friends that spoke my language. I just pick an area of interest. So say a class, I remember taking a public speaking class. And now that I think about it, that's crazy, because how do you go into public speaking without yet knowing the language? You know? But it
Yeah,
really
that's crazy.
to prepare my speech and do my final speech, which was how you got rated in the class. And so I was just going to classes that interested me, and I think that pushed me to learn the language. So instead of learning the language and then doing what you want, I was doing what I was interested in English. So then it forced me to learn English by having to research, by having to look up that word with genuine interest, and not just because it's another word that I have to learn, but it's a word. If I learn what this word is, then I'll get closer to finding out whatever subject I was studying. So
Mhm.
that's one that I would recommend to those learners that don't necessarily do well when they hear a lot of theory, but those that learn as they go, so more hands-on learners, which I know I definitely am now. That's what I would recommend. Find interests and figure out what your interests are, your activities, and then do those things in English, because it's more sustainable. I feel it keeps the excitement.
That is, I love that advice. And I just think that your journey sounds so beautiful. And I'm glad that even if you didn't do it intentionally, you were able to figure out that that is something that really worked for you, because yeah, that seems like a very almost like intuitive experience. Would you say that that's kind of the case, or?
I think so. I mean, I was fully embedded in, I don't know if it's the culture, because at the time I felt like in school I was everywhere but in the US because it was so diverse.
Yeah.
but I was embedded in the language, you know, and yeah, and let me back up a little bit. I think a lot of times when we're learning English in the immigrant population, or those that might not be immigrant but are just trying to learn a new language, I think we put the world on pause at times to learn English, and then we do the things that we love. And I can see why that's needed, right? But I think it's more fun, and like you said, it's more intuitive if you do the things that you love as you learn English. And yes, you will need some time to, you know, sit down and take a look at the grammar, sit down and practice. But I recommend that you try to learn the language as you do life, instead of putting your life on pause to learn the language. So sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, joining the soccer game thing, and then you go and talk to people and you'll make friends, and those people are going to text you. And I was freaking out because I was like, oh my goodness, I have these people texting me, and I had to go back to Google Translate to text them. But you know what? That helped. I learned so many words doing that, and it was more fun because I wasn't doing homework, but that was still contributing to my learning journey.
Yeah, totally. No, I love that so much. I know that we are close to time and I want to be respectful of your time as well. So I want to ask, like, do you have time for me to ask you one other question? If not,
Yeah,
that's okay.
as long as you need, I think we can.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So
So
one other thing that I know about you is that you love to travel. And so one thing I wanted to ask you first is, other than Spanish and English, do you speak any other languages?
I do not. I have attempted, but no, I do not speak other languages.
Okay, that'll be a great conversation for another day about attempting, because I too have attempted several languages and have a long way to go. But I wanted to ask, how has English served you throughout your travels in non-English speaking countries?
Mm, well,
Or if
I
it
actually
hasn't, that's
thought,
fine too.
I never thought about how English has served me in non-English speaking languages, in the sense of how I use that as a tool to communicate with others. I think it's usually the other way around. My native language, which is Spanish, has helped me in other in countries that don't speak English. But I will say that having gone through the process of learning English, developed a deeper sense of empathy and understanding when I go to another country and people are trying to speak English to me. I think a lot more understanding. This doesn't answer your question at all, but
No,
the fact
good.
that I spoke broken English and that it made sense in my head, even though it didn't make sense to English speakers, makes it so that I understand what they're trying to say in broken English as well. And so I think in that sense, it has made it easier for me to communicate with others. Apart from that, and again, I feel like I'm not addressing fully your question.
No,
But
this is great. I love that this is going in a different direction than I expected, because now I'm sort of feeling, I'm like, wow, the way I pose this question is kind of ethnocentric of me, but I like thinking like, oh, English helped you a lot because it's some like middleman language or something. But this is amazing. Please keep talking.
Well, it helped me, but maybe not in
English speaking
help
country.
me. Yeah, we're troubleshooting here. We're thinking and learning as we go. But I will say English is spoken almost everywhere, right? And the benefit of it is humongous.
Sure.
I actually don't, with Spanish and English, I haven't yet been to a place where I feel like, crap, I wish I'd known a third and fourth language. Obviously, that's not to discourage people who are trying to learn new languages. I think that's fantastic. Excuse me, I just haven't been in that situation yet, because when I go to Africa, for example, they know a lot of French and I don't speak French, but it is similar to Spanish. And then they usually mix English with French. And then I know what they're saying, even though I can't pronounce the French words. And again, having gone through the process of learning a language myself helps to understand what people are trying to say, because that broken English stayed in my head too. And so I understand how their brain isn't fully clicking yet, but I know where they're going to go because I went through that phase as well.
Ah, I love that. I love that so much. And then I guess, I mean, you've given a lot of advice to the people watching this video. And so I'm just so excited about all of the nuggets of wisdom that are within this video already. I'm curious if you had to give any advice about learning English, or maybe even just your experience moving to the United States, to your younger self, what would it be?
I think this sounds so wrong, but I feel I don't know what I would do differently. And maybe it's because I try to get into the mentality of, be grateful for what you did and don't be overcritical of yourself kind of thing. But right now, I think by luck, I did the things that I would recommend to others. So what I can do is summarize them. One is don't put your life on pause to learn English.
Mm.
Bring English into your interests, into your life. Another thing that I strategically did that I didn't mention was that I did challenge myself to make friends outside of my culture in my native language. So all of my friends were from Southeast Asia.
Mm.
Why I love Southeast Asia. And as soon as I was able to legally be an adult and fly by myself, not in South America, I just went to Southeast Asia and spent like 6 months over there because I built those deep connections with people that were outside of my culture.
Mm.
And I think in the US, where I was living in New York too, which is so many cultures, it's so easy to find people that speak your language. And I get that need for comfort because you were ripped from your culture and your home country and you were put into a new culture and you want a sense of comfort. And I think that's fine. But when you're up and going and you feel comfortable enough in the space that you are, I do challenge you to make friends outside of your culture, your language, because they really will force you. I mean, if you're the only Latina with a bunch of Southeast Asians, they're not going to know what you're saying unless you force yourself to communicate with them. And I think that really helped. So I would say make friends that force you to speak the language. Because at some point, even if you set the goal with if I say to my Spanish speaking friends, hey, let's just learn English. Let's just speak in English. 5 minutes later, we're going to go back to Spanish because we want to laugh. That's more important at the moment. That's natural human connections. And so force yourself to put yourself in an environment that will force you to learn the language and watch a lot of movies. That goes back to not putting your life on pause and doing the things that you like doing, but in English. I was watching a lot of cheap budget Christmas movies year round.
I love that.
Because it was, and I think the reason why Christmas movies were successful in teaching me a lot of English is because you know how all of them are going to end, right? There's cliche, and there's of course the Christmas festivities, and you know where the stories are gonna go. They're not Marvel movies for the most part, so they're not complicated. You can follow the story along without yet knowing all the words, but they're still cute enough, and every movie is different enough for you to want to learn and like follow the words themselves. So that's something that I did. And then also lots of music. I love music. So I was listening to all my, all the latest and famous artists and just trying to understand, looking up the words, doing karaoke by yourself, because that'll you look up the words and learn. And I still remember that put down the window means, put down the window. But I thought it was a way more complicated word than put down the window. And that's because I just heard it in a song. And I don't ask me what song it was, but I remember the impact of it. So definitely engage in the things that you normally would do and learn as you go. And I would say the same thing to those who are professionals, right? In my case, I was a high school student, but I've noticed a lot of professionals who put the life on pause completely. And that makes you feel like I need to get it done in 3 months because I'm dedicating 3 full months to this. If you have the resources to do it, that is great. But if you can involve the language in your everyday life, I think it will be more enjoyable for you. So maybe find those who are professionals as well, especially the industry that you want to be in, and maybe just go to the networking events to force you to get into that mentality versus putting your life on pause completely.
I love it. I love that advice. I think it's great. And I feel like now in every language that I'm learning, I need to do karaoke. Like I'm going to have to do some karaoke in Spanish. I think that sounds great.
Yeah, by yourself or go to the karaoke, because that would definitely force you to learn a song really well.
Well, yeah, I think if you're wanting to get over a fear of like speaking another language in public, go do karaoke in that language and learn to laugh at yourself, because that would definitely help.
Yeah. And, I'm glad that you brought up the, putting yourself out in public. I think that's one hesitation that we all have. And it's 100% normal. It's to be afraid to make mistakes because you will sound silly. I mean, I will validate some of those feelings because I think generally this is unfortunate, but in the US, sometimes people will undermine your intelligence because you can't yet express it. And I see that a lot in the professional world, where we have a lot of people from India who are highly trained, they're very skilled, but because they can't get that intelligence and analytical thinking out from their mouths, doesn't mean that it's not there. And so I get the fear, and I'm not invalidating it, but what do we do about it? Do we just internalize that and don't make an effort? That's also not very productive. I think it's good to acknowledge the feeling, know that it's valid, and now let's get out of our comfort zone and not be afraid to maybe speak with an accent or speak broken English at times. I think something that a lot of Americans that don't speak another language, who don't speak another language, fail to recognize is that someone that has an accent, that is an indicator that they speak another language, which is already hard enough to do.
Yeah.
And so remind yourself that what you're doing, most Americans don't do, right? Most Americans don't speak a second language. And so own that and be proud of that. Be proud of the fact that you are taking on a challenge and speak up, because it's just with practice that proficiency will come. And the accent aspect, I know a lot of people try to completely remove their accent. And again, if you have the resources to do that, and that's something that interests you, that's great. But in my personal experience, I never tried to strategically remove the accent. I think once you get to a point that you're fluent in the words and in writing, your accent, it's more like a personality trait. Like with me, I tells the story. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't hear it," and now it's gotten to the point that if someone can't hear it, I'm almost sad because it's like a side of me got removed. I went through all this journey, and if you don't hear it, it's almost like it's been erased, right? And so I would say also own your accent. Don't let that be intimidating or a scary thing. It's part of your story. That's like removing sometimes, your last name. Like sometimes it tells where you come from. Obviously not that dramatic, but it tells part of your story. And that there shouldn't be any shame in your story. So there shouldn't be any shame in your accent. It's an indicator that you've taken on a new challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I always like to emphasize too. I mean, with accents, that's part of your identity. That's who you are. And I love that you're saying that it's showing your story and things like that, because for me, I mean, just talking back about how you were talking about how not a lot of Americans have learned a second language. Number one, you're absolutely right. A lot of high schools require a second language, but how many people actually retain that information? Very few. And it is sad, I mean, to see these people like judging based on accents or thinking that you're less smart or whatever it is, or not educated on a specific topic because of your accent, or maybe if you're tripping over your words a little bit because you're just trying to express it in your second language rather than your first, right? one thing that I really like, there's this author, I don't know if you've heard of her, but her name's Brene Brown. And you okay. She wrote a book called Daring Greatly, and she talks about this quote from Theodore Roosevelt about how, I swear I've talked about this in so many videos now, but I mean, it's so perfect because she talks about how if you are in the arena getting your butt kicked and you're the one trying and you're, you know, getting bloody and dirt all over your face, and, you know, you're the one that's putting in effort and really trying and failing and getting back up, and someone else is criticizing you for your efforts, but they're not also in the arena practicing and trying and learning a second language and getting past that barrier of, you know, maybe looking stupid to other people or something like that, their opinion truly does not matter. And I know that that can be really hard to internalize, because even me with learning second languages, like I totally understand that feeling of not wanting to feel stupid, you know, it's very valid. But yeah, but unless they're in there trying to learn and understand where you're coming from, to me, their opinion and their thought doesn't matter. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, they're not a part of your goal. It's almost like, you know, a bullet. You have to think of yourself as a bullet. To me, a bullet, it's not asking permission for anyone to move. It's just going to go straight into where it needs to go. I feel like it's a bad analogy because bullets are used for sometimes bad, oftentimes bad purposes, but think of yourself as a bullet. You have places to go. Okay, maybe someone might distract you, but let them be that, just a distraction that you can come back from. They shouldn't be a barrier. So you as a bullet, you're not asking for permission. You're just going where you need to go. Now, because you're not that fast, strong like a bullet, people might distract you. Just let them be that, a distraction, and you keep going. So once you have your goal, you know, those distractions, they're not part of your goal. You just encounter them along the way and you move on. So when you have a goal in mind, those minor opinions, reactions that people have, just remember that they're not part of your goal. They're just tiny distractions. You move past them.
I love that. And I think that that's a beautiful note to end on. So with that, unless you have anything else that you want to add, anything else that you want to tell these lovely language learning people of the world.
I would say, you know, what you're doing, it's already hard enough. Don't be too hard on yourself. This is an entire process. You have to every day give yourself almost like validations to remind yourself that you're not how you're speaking right now. How you speak English is not who you are. It is just one more skill that you're learning. It doesn't determine your worth. It absolutely does not determine your intelligence, because knowing English doesn't make you more intelligent, or not knowing it doesn't make you less intelligent. It is seriously one more tool in your toolbox that is worth having, but it doesn't determine your intelligence or your personal worth. So remember that you're working on acquiring one more tool that will be very helpful in this country, and it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. Have fun with it. Again, bring English into your life instead of putting your life on pause to learn English, because that will lead to an enjoyable journey.
Thank you, Damia, so much for being here and for indulging all of my many questions. Your story is incredible. And I was just, as soon as I heard it, I knew I had to have you on, because I was so inspired by it. And I know so many other people will too. So with that, thank you all for watching. I'm glad you are all here to experience this with me. Damia is amazing. And yeah, if you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe. And until next time, happy language learning, friends. Bye.